Okay, so we're going to get started. So today we're going to talk about toilet training for all learners. We work with a wide range of learners, so kids with, disabilities, kids with behaviors, kids with just language delays. So we want to make sure that we're targeting all of our clientele. It'll be myself and Rebecca providing the presentation. Sorry, my slides are getting a little funky. So I am a BCBA within the company, and Rebecca is a BCABA. We both specialize in autism, early intervention, parent education, adaptive skills. So definitely, we really enjoy the work that we do here, and we are excited to kind of give you this training for toilet training. So on our agenda, we're going to talk about if your child is ready. I know that's always an interesting concept or question that a lot of parents have. We're going to talk about some of the barriers that come along when we start toilet training, because there are going to be some challenges. I wish I could tell you it's all sunshine and rainbows, but it's not. We're going to talk about how to prepare your child, where to start, the reinforcements that you want to have, different methods and strategies, and some tips and tricks. And then we'll leave room at the end for questions. So I want to go over this idea that we can teach your child to potty train, and you can teach your child to potty train. You can walk them through the steps, but we can't really force them to void or go in the toilet. That's the hardest part. That's the most challenging part, is getting their body to recognize those cues, to release, to understand that when they sit on the toilet, it's time to release, versus when that diaper's on, it's time to release. So this is something that we're going to talk about throughout the training, but I just want to let you know that we can definitely teach your kid to go through the steps. That second part of actually voiding is usually the biggest challenge for a lot of our families and a lot of our kiddos. So we're going to start first and just talk about some of the prerequisites or things that we would like our learners to do in terms of toilet training, what skills your kids should have. And I checked some of the boxes and not all, because we don't always meet all of these things. We've had kids who toilet trained without having some of these skills. And while we were beginning the toilet training process, we were able to teach these skills. So one of them is that you want your child to be able to stay dry for 1 to 2 hours. So most babies 12 months and under typically are not dry for 1 to 2 hour periods. They are going constantly or changing diapers constantly. So this is not where you want to start. You want to make sure your child is able to stay dry for longer periods of time. The other piece is you want them to be able to sit on the toilet for a few minutes. Some of our learners are terrified of sitting on a toilet or a potty. So this is kind of where we have to start, just to get them comfortable with the idea and see that it's normal to sit on a potty. We want them to be able to show awareness or discomfort when they're wet. So some of our kids will sit in a dirty diaper for long periods of time. They're not really aware that they've soiled themselves or that they've gone potty. So we want to make sure that our learners understand that there's something in there. The diapers are made really well these days, and they can just hold, they're like commercials where they're like, it holds 5 pounds because it holds so much of that liquid and so much of the stool. Kids are not aware. We want to make sure they are aware that there's something different in there. It feels different. We want them to be able to follow some simple directions. So again, this one is beneficial, but not necessarily needed. It's helpful that our kid understands, let's go to the restroom, let's sit down, give me that. Things like that are beneficial with toilet training, but not necessary. And the last piece, which I do think is a little bit more necessary, is regular bowel movements. So we do have some children who don't have regular bowel movements, whether it be a medical concern, or they have food allergies, or we just need to look into that piece, because regular bowel movements allow us to determine when's best to put your child on the toilet and to practice toilet training. And when the bowel movements are not regular, it makes things pretty difficult. So looking at that piece, some of these prerequisites you want to have, but again, they're not necessary. It would be nice if we had all of them. And you kind of are in a better position when you have all of them, but we don't need all of them. We can work around it. So things that we can do. So if you have a kid who on that checklist isn't meeting all of those checklists, obviously we want to look at, well, how do we check that off? Or how do I get more of those things checked off before we even start potty training? So we want to talk about including children in the toilet training process at a really young age. Thinking about changing their diaper often, because a lot of the kids who sit in their diaper and are comfortable sitting in their diaper can sit in it for a while, and we don't want them to get comfortable or think that that's normal. So changing diapers often will help with them feeling that being dry is normal. That's the new normal. talking about their bowel movements and when they've gone poo poo or pee pee, having that discussion and that narration during diaper changing will help, because then they can understand later on when you ask them, did you poo poo your diaper or did you make pee pee? Modeling toileting for your child is a funny topic that we discuss with our families all the time, and everybody's like, that's so weird, but it's something important to allow your child to come into the restroom and see you use the potty, you void, and even for you to give yourself a yay, I did it, I went potty, even though it's a normal everyday thing, is something that you want to do. You want to model that experience and model that it's normal, but it's a really good thing to go pee pee or poo poo in the potty. Even having siblings model is also beneficial, because the sibling is more in their age range and in their realm, and it seems, it's still a very appropriate skill for them and a very proud skill for them. The other thing, if we are looking at kids with bowel movement issues, we want to look at speaking with a pediatrician or a doctor to see what's going on there. Whether it be the food, if they have an allergy. A lot of the kids these days are allergic to certain milk products, and so that will affect bowel movements. You want to get all of the medical stuff out of the way before we get started here. And another thing that we might want to work on and consider is a functional way for our child to communicate that they need a diaper change. So some kids get to the point where they are taking off their diaper, they're tugging their diapers. We have kids who will learn to bring a new diaper to mom or dad to indicate they need a diaper change. If they have a place where they're always getting a diaper change, some of our children will lay down in that spot to indicate it's time for a change. So even if they don't have words, we have ways that we can teach them functional communication to get that point across to others. So Rebecca's going to talk to you now about some of the common barriers that you're going to face, because again, it's not always sunshine and rainbows, and it's hard. Toilet training is definitely hard. So she's going to talk you through some of these barriers that you might run into.
Good morning, everybody. So working in this field, we've seen that these are four of the main common barriers or challenges that we run into prior to starting potty training. So we'll go over them and then go over some ways that we can overcome them or reduce them as barriers or challenges. So your first one is your communication. Oftentimes, a lot of parents think that if my child is not talking or able to say, I need to go potty, they're not ready for potty training. That's not the case. We have other ways that we can work to support the child to communicate their needs, even if they're not vocalizing those words. So if your child's not verbal, we can determine another way that the child can indicate to use the potty. Your second one is your anxiety sensory. So when we're ready to potty train, sometimes we'll see that some kids are hesitant to even want to sit. We were talking to a parent previously, and they said that they wanted to start potty training the child, and they sat them on the toilet and they freaked out. And then we were talking about, well, it's kind of weird, right? They're going from being in their diaper to sitting in a chair with a hole under them, and maybe they fell, So those things are things to consider as fearful or anxiety driven that we have are considered a challenge that we have to overcome. So we'll talk about some ways that we can overcome those. Motivation. So your motivation is a big piece. Right now, what's motivating the child to go potty is that diaper, that safety net. So now we have to change the diaper as their safety net and motivate them to try to go into the potty. So we create that through motivation and making it interesting and using different types of strategies to create play opportunities for us to introduce the potty training routine. And then how Teresa mentioned, your health issues are a barrier in terms of the data part that we'll talk about in a little bit later, because if your child has irregular bowel movements or has constipation issues, it makes it hard to determine when your child will be going routinely. So we always recommend talking to your doctor if you're noticing your child isn't going consistently, to rule out anything medically. So if we move on to the next slide, we'll go over some ways that we can overcome these barriers and challenges. So like I mentioned, a child doesn't need to be using vocalizations to necessarily communicate that they need to go potty. We can use what we call PECs, so they're the little visuals. Some of you may be familiar with them because you use them with your child now, but we essentially make a little potty card. It's a toilet, a generic toilet or a toilet of your choosing from your home that we can send out, and we teach the child to hand that visual to the parent to communicate that they need to go potty. Your next one is your gesture. So if your kid is using signs or they're gesturing with their hands, we can definitely teach them to tap their diaper, right? To communicate, I need to go, or use the sign for potty. So they're communicating in another way that's not necessarily vocal. Your other way is your AAC devices, which is an alternative communication device. It almost looks like a tablet, but it has like a button that we can assign so that they push to communicate that they need to use the restroom if they're not vocally speaking yet. In regards to your anxiety sensory, so again, this is a piece that we do often see that is a barrier, and we work through it through exposure trials. So if your child is scared to even sit on the toilet, we may not start there. We might have to do just exposure of the child being comfortable staying in the area where the toilet is, not necessarily next to it, but just within the area, and then slowly moving towards it. But the more exposure the child gets to that fear that they have, the easier it'll be to tolerate it. They may not necessarily love it, but they'll learn to tolerate it. Social stories is a great way to overcome some of those sensory fears, and Teresa will go a little bit more in detail further on, but they're essentially stories that talk about what happens in the potty training routine, and then what happens after, and we can individualize it for each child. So it can have their favorite characters, it can have pictures of themselves, just so they can see it and they can relate to it. Like Teresa said, modeling is a great way to get children to observe what's happening around them, but also motivate them because they're seeing like siblings sit down and try the potty training. If, let's say, we can mute sensory, so sometimes it's the fan or the specific type of flush that the toilet has. If we can mute it or provide a different way to work on potty training, we can definitely overcome this fear. So maybe we don't turn on the fan when we go into the bathroom, or we try a different restroom versus the one that they're fearful of first, so that they get comfortable and we overcome that anxiety. And then if the child doesn't like to sit with their, bare bottom, that's okay. We can start with just practicing with sitting with clothes on. And once they get comfortable with that, we work on taking pants down. We work on putting pants down and sitting. To work on motivation, this piece is your exposure, right? We want to make it fun, and we're really dramatic about it. We're saying, yes, I'm going to go potty. Awesome. Let's go. Ooh, this is fun. Guess what? I get a candy after if I sit. We want to reinforce siblings doing it, so they're noticing, oh, mom's giving attention to sibling because he's going potty. We make it fun. We can add in pretend play with a doll or their favorite figurine like Woody or Buzz Lightyear, and they go through the potty training routine, and then we say, you try. So they're more comfortable because they've done it with their figurines. And then lastly, to overcome the health issues, so seeing your doctor or gastrointestinal specialist to rule out anything medical, or maybe they recommend specific foods or specific diets that may help the child go regularly. And then on our end, also monitoring the type of diet and food intake. Everybody has different, bowel movements or bowel how they process their food. So even for us, some foods make us more constipated or make us go more consistently. So like that, the same thing with children, right? So if your child is a kid who loves bananas, those are really high in fiber, which means that they probably don't go as consistently, or may make them be constipated. So we might have to monitor the amount of bananas they get if we're implementing potty training. So Tress is going to go over some prerequisites to start potty training. Oh, Tressa, I can hear you.
Sorry about that. So some of the simple strategies that you would want to implement and get started would be, just to expose your child to the idea of potty training. So again, we talked a little bit about the modeling, allowing your kid to come in, see, look, the water's different. Do you hear mama's peeping? Social stories, we're going to talk a little bit more about those in depth, but it's a story that walks your child through the steps and what it is like to use the potty, what they should expect after. They get their favorite reinforcer, that everybody goes potty. We want to talk about it, so normalize it for them, because right now going potty in their diaper is very normal, and we want to adjust it. Things like videos. So we can show kids videos. There's a variety of different videos on YouTube, whether they're cartoon or actual videos of kids sitting on the potty and going. Those video models are beneficial because we do have a lot of kids who love watching YouTube, and these are a little bit more educational and will help in the long run. And then pretend play. So there's a lot of studies that show if we use a baby doll or we use an Elmo or a Mickey Mouse and we place them on the toilet and we walk our child through those steps, it makes it more fun, more appealing, and they're more likely to try it out after Mickey's done it. So these are some just simple strategies just to expose your child to the idea of potty training. Maybe you're not ready to just jump right in full force, but you want to see where they're at and kind of gauge if they're ready to get that started. Now, when we talk about environment in terms of where we're doing the potty training, this was a question that had come up before in regards to, do we need to do potty training in the restroom? Because we do have families who will use a potty in the living room because it is quicker to get access to. Maybe the restroom is upstairs and you're worried about him having the accident as you're running upstairs. Um, this is perfectly fine. You can use that potty wherever. At some point, you'll have to transition, obviously, to the restroom. But if you're beginning that process, it's okay to have that potty in the restroom or have it in the living room. The only thing that you want to consider is that you want to make sure that the environment is set up. So you want to have everything available near that potty. We'll talk about that because it can either make or break your intervention. It can make or break your toilet training process. If you don't have those items readily available to either reinforce or to help with the cleanup process, it's definitely going to affect toilet training. So when we think about setting up the environment, Rebecca talked about some of those modifications, things like maybe not having the fan on, having a stool. If your child is using the toilet, and obviously the toilet's going to be higher up for them, if they sit on that stool, it props their feet up. It is less comfortable for their feet to be dangling. So that is a modification that you can make. Also, having a stool in the restroom for hand washing helps because our little ones, it's really uncomfortable for us to have to hold them up to do the whole hand washing process. Other modifications you can consider is the lighting. For some kids, fluorescent lighting is too bright, so we might have to dim the lighting. Even in terms of background noise, or we want a specific, towel that we use, and it's a Spider-Man hand towel, and that's his favorite. When we think about potty or seat, I typically tell parents that's a choice for the child. So if you sit your child on the potty and you put the seat on there and they are freaking out and it is bloody murder, don't fight that battle right now. If you want to fight the battle of toilet training, then just focus on getting a toilet training seat that they're comfortable with or an actual potty. So I tell parents, go to the Targets and the Walmarts and pull those things down and have your child sit on it, have them pick it out, because if they pick it out, they feel like they have control. It's something that they like, something that they're interested in. So you're going to have more luck with that option versus I'm picking this because it's what works. I know that a lot of parents want to use the seat that goes over the potty because you don't want to have to clean out the mess. But if you have a kid with a lot of behaviors, the potty seat is actually a better option if that's what your child is leaning towards. And then eventually we'll shape and get them to the point where they're sitting on an actual toilet. You want to have items in reach. So again, if we are toilet training in a living room or a kitchen and we're not doing it in the bathroom, I want to make sure that I have everything there. So not only just like toilet paper and wipes, but even our reinforcers, the items that we're going to use to say you did it, good job, those items need to be within reach, because if I don't reinforce right away, as soon as they're going tinkle or as soon as they are, voiding, then that connection may not be made. So I want to make sure that everything's within reach, even in terms of timers or visuals. So for some of our kids, if we're just working on sitting on the potty for an amount of time, we want to have that timer available so that we can set the timer and they're not sitting there while we're running around the house to find it. And then they sometimes will get up and run and roam around and not necessarily stay on the toilet. So if all of those items are in reach and our environment set up better, we are likely to be more successful. Now, the argument of underwear or diapers. So whenever we toilet train or we talk to parents about toilet training, the question always comes up of, should we still keep him in his diapers or should we do underwear? I was always a proponent of the cold turkey method and get rid of the diapers. But the research is there that shows also that the kids who end up wearing diapers during toilet training, on average, they take longer to toilet train. The reason behind this is because the diaper is the safety net. The diaper indicates it's time to go. I can go here. So for a lot of kids, they will sit on the toilet for 5-10 minutes. Even some parents will stretch it to 20 minutes because they're like, I know he needs to go. And then once they put that diaper back on, the kid goes in the diaper. The diaper is the safety net. The diaper indicates I can go because this is going to catch it. This is where I normally go. And so we have to kind of change that. When we do without the diaper, obviously it is messier. It is a lot more work on parents, but it is a quicker method, especially for some of our kids who aren't showing that body awareness that they've soiled themselves. And then again, when that happens, if it does happen that we do make a mess or we do have an accident, you're just remaining calm and you're reacting, and you're going to clean it up, but you're going to remind them. You might have them sit on the toilet to practice and remind them, this is where we go, this is where we need to sit when we're ready. But again, it typically is the quicker method when it comes to toilet training, to just do away with the diapers and do some underwear. Now, in terms of nighttime, diapers and pull-ups will still be used. So we're going to talk about the phases of toilet training, because it doesn't happen all in one shot. I wish it did. And for some kids, it might. Some kids are super smart and they just figure it out and it clicks and they go through all the phases really quickly. But we'll go through the phases and talk about how that happens, because toilet training during the day and toilet training at night are two different things. So before you start toilet training and before we have a lot of our families start toilet training, we typically ask them to take some data. Data is the foundation of what we do. And if we have data, we're more likely to make better decisions about scheduling and sitting our child on the potty. It helps us determine if there are regular bowel movements. So this is just kind of a snippet of what our data sheet looks like. Basically, it breaks down your day-to-day, your schedule. So if your child wakes up at 7 a.m., you're going to check right away, do they have a bowel movement? And if they did, then, we're going to write down BM, which is bowel movement. If they are just soiled, meaning they wet themselves, they peed themselves, or if they're dry. Using a data sheet like this, we can be able to find patterns. So whenever I wake him up, he always has a dirty diaper. So we're definitely not ready for nighttime training. But I might be able to wake him up a little bit earlier and catch him before he goes. I might be able to sit him on the toilet right after his juice, because usually 30 minutes after juice, we have a bowel movement. So looking at a data sheet like this, we can monitor their current levels. So how often they're going throughout the day. We can also determine patterns of times in the day when they're going, and then set up our schedule. So if at around 1 o'clock, that's usually our bowel movement time, our going pee-pee time, we can push it back, and at 12:45, 12:30, we can sit the child on the potty to see if we can catch them going, because that's usually what toilet training is about. You've got to catch them in the act and going, and then we get to reinforce and say, you did it, woohoo, and then they build that cause and effect. So taking data is great because it helps us set up for a better schedule, instead of just kind of playing, let's just guess times when we're going to put the kid on the potty, or I'm just going to try it here and there. Trying it here and there is not going to work. You want to have a schedule. You want to be consistent. And that's the biggest part about toilet training, is parents' consistency. So Rebecca's going to talk to you about reinforcers, because when we talk about toilet training, if you don't have a reinforcer and there's nothing in it for your kid to go potty in the toilet, then there's really no need for him to change his behavior. So she's going to talk about reinforcers for you guys.
Sorry. Reinforcers are really important. They will help change behavior over time and make it consistent. So the big thing about reinforcers is that they are individualized to each child. They're idiosyncratic, meaning what might work for one kid in terms of reinforcement may not work for another kid. Maybe for your older kiddos, candies worked or stickers worked, but maybe for your younger one, the toys might work for him. So you guys know your child best, and so you know exactly what they love, if they like cars, if they like trains, if they like specific snacks. So that's important to identify so that we know how to reinforce the potty time behavior. So let's go over some different types of reinforcers. We like to remember it in an acronym called EATS. So breaking that down, E is for edible. So those are all of your foods, right? So if your child likes M&Ms, if he likes lollipops or goldfish, Cheez-Its, all of those edibles are considered a reinforcer. A is for activity. So anything that the child does that's an activity like a puzzle, or they get to go outside, or they get to do some coloring or read a book, those are activity reinforcers. Tangibles are anything that's a physical object. So small toys like a car, a small bouncy ball, some fidget toys, those are all considered tangible reinforcers. Then you have your sensory. So sensory is a lot of things. So going outside, painting, they could do Play-Doh, they can play with kinetic sand, they can listen to music. Those are all sensory reinforcers. And then we have your social. So social is your automatic, what we do all the time, that praise part, like, good job, you did it, mom's so proud of you, you're such a big boy. Those are all types of reinforcers. And like I mentioned previously, knowing exactly what motivates your child, we can use that as a reinforcer, but it's specific to that child. So we need to know exactly, okay, my child really loves snacks, so let's try snacks. Or he really likes candy, so let's try this as a reinforcer. Or he really likes toys. So in the next slide, we'll go over some things to consider when we implement reinforcements. So the first thing you want to think about is choosing an item that the child can either consume and or has an end. So we want this item to be reinforcing enough to reinforce the behavior, potty time, but that it doesn't consume their whole time after that. So when we want it to be small enough that they get it for a little bit after and then they move on to something else. So your edibles are great because they consume it and then it's all done. There's nothing else after that. Or even a small toy like a car, right? At some point, they get bored of the car because that's all they got, and then they move on to something else. This helps eliminate issues with transitions. So there is some things that are more highly reinforcing for some kids that make it hard to transition away from. Most of the time, what we see is your tablet or your phone. So when we deliver a tablet or a phone as a reinforcement, because there's so much you can do in there, like you have your Netflix, you have your YouTube, you have different games on there, you can go down a rabbit hole, and it makes it hard for the child to transition because you might want them to only have it for a couple minutes, but they may not be ready. And then we run into behaviors after that. And then the next day it might be hard to reinforce them with other things, or they may not want to try to sit because they remembered, oh, I got the tablet, but I didn't get enough time with it. So choosing something that's mildly reinforcing is important to consider that they can move away from. So it eliminates any issues with transitions. The other part is limiting reinforcers throughout the day. So if we're choosing specific reinforcers with potty training, we don't want to provide those reinforcers throughout the day, so that in a sense they're deprived of it, and it creates that motivation to sit because they get that reinforcer. So let's say we choose M&Ms. We don't want to give M&Ms throughout the day and only give M&Ms during potty time, because then they know, okay, I go potty, then I get an M&M. It becomes a paired reinforcer for them. On the other side of this, the deprivation part is your satiation. If we only use M&Ms all the time, they might get bored of it, and then they're not reinforced as much if we do it every day for the potty training. So we have to consider changing some of those reinforcers if your child loses or becomes bored of that item. We always recommend like just a little jar of different types of reinforcers. It just doesn't have to be candies or edibles. It can be different little fidget toys. The dollar spot will be your best friend during this time. Just put stuff in the container, and then once they go pee or poo poo, they get to choose their own type of reinforcement. This last part, the size, immediacy, and contingency, is important for reinforcement. So like I discussed, so the size of it. So if it's too high, we run into problem behavior. If it's too small, it might not be reinforcing enough. And this is dependent also on the kid. So let's say we're doing your M&Ms and then you only give one M&M. That might work for one kid, and he loves it. He gets one M&M and he'll go potty. But for another kid, it might not be as reinforcing. So that kid might need more of a handful of M&Ms so that he's more motivated to go the next time. Your immediacy is delivering it as soon as possible. Like we mentioned earlier, I know it sounds kind of gross, but having that little jar of rewards right there next to the potty will be important, because we want to deliver the reinforcer as soon as we hear them tinkle, as soon as we hear that plop on the toilet, so that they know that they were reinforced when they do that specific behavior. what happens sometimes is that we reinforce too late. So, or we delay the reinforcement. And let's say we say, okay, you get a reward after you hand wash. And we do the whole potty training routine. And then we deliver the reinforcement after they hand wash. They pair hand washing as the behavior that they have to do in order to get the reinforcer, and not necessarily them going to the bathroom. And then contingency. So this is when the behavior occurs. So like we talked about, there may be some things that we have to do prior to actually sitting on the toilet or voiding of those bowel movements. And we deliver the reinforcement based on the what our goal is with that, with the child. So if your child's scared of sitting on the toilet, our goal is for him to sit on the toilet, and we're going to provide that reinforcement then as soon as they sit. And then once they get comfortable and they're doing it consistently, we change the goal. Okay, you have to sit for 1 minute or 2 minutes, and then eventually they have to void in order to get that reinforcement. So it's contingent on the behavior that we're targeting. So Teresa will go over some methods and strategies that will help with toilet training.
So we're essentially going to give you all of the methods and strategies that have shown progress or have shown evidence-based that they can be beneficial in toilet training. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you use all of them. It's definitely like a toolbox, and you pick and choose which tools are going to work for your child, because ultimately some kids do well with modeling and that's all they need, but other kids need more than the modeling. So just when you're thinking about these steps, obviously you as a parent are the professional of that child. So I always recommend, we have this conversation and we say, these are the things that we can do. And then I want parents to say, well, this sounds like this would work for him, or this sounds like it would be our best bet. And then we'll implement from there. If you feel like you're a parent who wants more support, obviously that's where we come in. So we can help you design the program that fits your child, but it's really not a one size fits all. In the research and doing this, there were, books and research articles that say, this is it, this is the way to do it. But they have clinicians who are running the toilet training all day. They're not real moms and dads. This kid is in a facility 12 hours a day doing toilet training. And so that's not real life. We have things to do around the house. We are busy, we're working. So making it more real life, this is what matters to parents. So I always talk to parents about having a checklist of things that they need to have available that you've already purchased. So the underwear and or clothing, if you're doing underwear, let your child pick. You do their favorite characters, whether it's Mickey Mouse or Spider-Man. Clothing, you want to make sure your child is dressed in loose-fitting clothing. We don't want to have to be struggling with skinny jeans or buttons. Just something that's simple. You want to have some cleaning supplies readily available, because there will be some messes. Have your potty or seat readily available, possibly so that your kid has played with it, interacted with it, is aware of it. You want to have those rewards available. And rewards, you can have candies, you can have little things of slime, you can have those squishy balls in the Target dollar section. Whatever works for your child and is going to keep them motivated to do this behavior again. You want to have a chart or data sheet. So a chart and a data sheet so you can track when we had an accident, when we actually went, because sometimes you'll catch them going and you can say, okay, yesterday we had 2 in the potty and tomorrow we're going to have 3, and let's shoot for 3. And then a timer or a schedule. So again, the timer helps to make sure that we're not forcing kids to sit on the toilet for 30 minutes. That's way too long of a time. But also a schedule. If you have multiple people working in the home, like you have mom and dad, but then also grandma comes, helps and babysits, the schedule helps grandma see when she should be putting, your child on the potty. Even if you're working with a daycare setting or a nanny, it's beneficial that everybody's aware of the plan. So when we talked about toilet training happening in phases, I want to address this piece that in most of the research, toilet training will happen in 3 different phases. So in the first phase, you have pee. Most kids will pee in the toilet first, and they won't initiate it. They're not going to just magically one day tell you, I'm ready to pee in the potty, and then go pee in the potty. That's not really how it works. Usually we teach them to sit on the toilet and they end up accidentally peeing, and we get to reinforce and do the party inside the restroom. And then they start to learn to initiate, to tell us that I kind of need to sit on the potty or pee pee, or they'll pull you to the restroom. Then we usually have bowel movements and then initiating of bowel movements. Now, again, this doesn't always happen in this order. I just worked with a kid a few months ago who decided to do poop in the toilet but has not peed in the toilet. So sometimes it happens out of order. The last phase is nighttime. So nighttime, because it's a longer span that we're asking them or we're looking at them staying dry for. Now it's not just 1 to 2 hours, it's 6 to 12 hours sometimes for some of our kiddos. So nighttime is going to be a different story when we decide to get rid of that diaper or that pull up. And then generalization is out in the community. Now we don't have our potty with us. The bathroom's different. There are a lot of scary things when you go to a community restroom, like the blowers, the hand dryers are really loud. The toilet seat might be higher or colder. So thinking about generalizing and taking all these skills out into the community is another step that we'll have to work through. So typically when we start toilet training with our kiddos, we recommend doing what's called habit training. It's just a great way to introduce the idea of toilet training. We will practice throughout the day. So several times throughout the day, I usually tell parents every hour and a half to 2 hours, we're going to go practice and go through the steps of sitting on the potty. So we're not necessarily, again, because we can't force your kid to go, we're not necessarily requiring them to go, but we're having them sit on the potty and practice going through the steps. And usually we can catch them going. During this time, we don't recommend forcing your kid to sit on the toilet for long periods of time. We typically say don't go any longer than 10 minutes because your kid's going to get sick of it and they're going to be very upset. In some of the intensive toilet trainings where kids are older and they're really, they feel like they're running out of time, we're looking at like 8 and 9-year-olds that still aren't toilet trained. They will do every hour. But I will tell you, with our 2-year-olds going every hour, they get very, very mad at us. That's a lot of transitioning and it's usually really bad. Kids tend to push back on that. Especially with toilet training, it's a control thing. They can control what goes in and what comes out. And so that's going to kind of push us backwards and you're going to run into a lot of behaviors. So I typically recommend every 1.5 to 2 hours, we practice, we go sit on the potty. When we're doing the habit training, we typically look at following a specific schedule. So I have parents, tell me when you guys wake up, tell me when you guys go to bed. Now, when do you do lunch? When do you do dinner? And then we'll break up times. I have parents set alarms on their phone to remind them to go take their kid to the restroom because we typically have a longer span of schedule, or we will hold it in between work and whatever we're doing. So making sure that we're on a schedule that's consistent, whether it be right after we eat and we wash our hands, we're going to go try and sit on the potty, or before we go in the bath, we're going to try. Having a schedule is just important overall, not just for toilet training, but just overall for your kids' daily living. When we're in the restroom, we're talking about, what they're doing. We're labeling actions. We're talking about going pee-pee in the potty. If the child voids and goes, then we get to have that party and reinforce. And if not, that's okay. We tried. We're going to try again later. Don't worry about it. So it's kind of a no pressure method. Especially for our kids with behaviors and who want control over things, we're kind of leaving it up to them when they're actually going to void. And sometimes it happens. And again, we get to cheer and then that connection is made. But it's just about getting that connection to happen. Dry checks is another method that you can implement, or a strategy that you can implement. So with dry checks, it's in between potties or in between your potty visits. So if I have a child who's either wearing a diaper still or in underwear, either way, we can do dry checks. Dry checks are in between my 1 to 2 hours. I'm going to stop in between and I'm going to check my kid and open up their diaper and say, oh, you're dry? You didn't go pee pee in your diaper? Awesome job. Give them a high five and then give them the reinforcer. If they do have something in their diaper, then I say, oh, we soiled our diaper, or we went pee pee in our diaper. Let's go clean it up. We try not to punish or shame them, but we do want to reinforce them for that diaper being dry or the underwear being dry. So this is beneficial, again, if you have a kid and you want to keep the diaper on because you have carpet, or you don't want to deal with all that mess. Or if you have a kid in underwear who's having those accidents and not really understanding that that's gross and that he needs to go in the potty. So the dry checks give you another opportunity to reinforce, but we're reinforcing for being dry and not going in our diaper or our underwear. So this is another good strategy. I put like a sample schedule. So 1, we're going to sit on the potty. 2, we'll check. And at 3, we'll sit on the potty again. Another option that we kind of talked about was the modeling, the books or pretend play. So this can go into your social stories. So we can do social stories. We have, I believe, at least a boy and a girl version of toilet training and a social story. So if you want to talk to your child about potty training and what it looks like and what to expect, this walks them through those steps. So it's a book that you read with your child. And again, we have it in a boy or girl version. Don't feel like you need to go out and purchase this. This is something that we can provide to you. The other option is video models. So again, we have video. You can go on YouTube and find different videos of kids going through the toilet training process, receiving their reinforcer. You know, yay, you're a big boy, you're a big girl. Other options we have is a task analysis, which would be a schedule of what we do during the toilet training process. So if you have a learner who is using those visuals, who is working on chaining the routine of going potty, that's another good option that we can provide to you. Another option is to use those stuffed animals or those dolls or pretend play to kind of get them into the understanding of, look, Elmo sat on the potty, now it's your turn. Sometimes when we put in that choice or we say, do you want to go first or should Elmo go first? It's kind of a funny way to give them some of that control, but we're still going to sit on the potty. It's just who's going first? Is it you or is it Elmo? But they do have different like dolls and Elmo toys that actually you squeeze them and they pee, and it kind of shows them that process if we are parents who are shy and don't want to do the modeling. So that is another option. We cannot provide these to you, but they are available. So that's another option to consider in your toilet training. This is what a schedule or a task analysis would look like. So this is just a generic version, but we can create a version if you provide us photos of, you know, your guys' potty and, you know, possibly some of these steps we can create into a schedule for your child so they understand what happens next. And that's something that a lot of our parents will keep in the restroom. It's right there so you can remind them, like, what's next? Remember, we have to do this. The schedule stays the same regardless of whether grandma's taking him potty or you are or dad. So that's the beneficial part, is that it creates that routine. Building that routine, again, is so important with our young learners. They know what to expect. They know what's next. It helps with transitions. So this visual schedule is, again, another option that we can help provide. And we have generic ones like this, or we can help you create one at home. A token economy. So when we're doing toilet training and we're reinforcing, like Rebecca was saying, you know, we talk about edibles a lot because that's something that's easy and we can get rid of it. But at some point, we don't want to use edibles all the time. Or, you know, we have the iPad, but I don't want him to be on the iPad all day long because every time he uses the potty, he gets the iPad for 5 minutes, you know, and that's a lot. And then we even had, in my experience, we had a kid who was realizing that he got the iPad once he went pee. So he would go and tinkle a little bit and then get the iPad. And then 5 minutes later say, I got a potty, go tinkle a little bit and then get the iPad. So he really wised up. So this is when we want to spread out the reinforcement. We want him to realize, okay, going potty is a good thing, but we got to go potty more often before we get that reinforcer, because at some point, nobody gets reinforced every time they use the potty. So we'll spread out that reinforcement. So this is a token economy board. It's very much like the chart boards that they use in the preschool settings, but he has to go 3 times and he has to get the 3 stars before he gets access to the iPad. So again, it's a strategy that we use within our visuals. It's something that we can provide for you and we can help you implement. Especially some of our parent educators can come out and discuss the options. We try to individualize them to the kids. So what's being offered is all of his favorite things. And then sometimes we use fun little characters. So like if he likes Puppy Pal dogs, I've made one where the little tokens are Puppy Pal dogs. And so every time he gets that Puppy Pal dog, he's super excited because they're his favorite little characters too. So not only does he get reinforced with the iPad, but just getting his Puppy Pal dog, you know, token is exciting. So this is another option that we can implement within the toilet training process. And then again, going through all of those strategies, those are the strategies that are what are called evidence-based. That's the things that show that they have made progress with toilet training. So those are the ones that we recommend the most. Obviously, there are some other things that you've probably heard friends do or you've seen online. Doesn't mean that they necessarily don't work or won't work. Those are the ones that are the most evidence-based, that have shown the most progress in toilet training with kiddos of all types of learners. So Rebecca's going to talk to you now about some of the tips and tricks as you're getting into this toilet training process and things get a little crazy that you want to think about and maybe work into your strategies.
Some of these are things that we did cover throughout our webinar, but they're also things that we have experienced with other families that have worked. So the first one, again, we're making it fun, right? We don't want it to be something that's a negative thing. So we're really dramatic about it. We make it a positive experience. We reinforce a lot of their attempts so that they know that this is a fun thing. We add in all of their preferred activities or their preferred figurines so that they feel like this is fun. We're doing this all together. The second one is your distractors on potty. So sometimes it is hard to sit for a long period of time without having anything to do. I think even as adults, right, we don't go to the restroom without a phone or without a book. If you do, then you're reading like random things in the toilet, right, like the shampoo bottle. So just thinking about how we go potty is something that we need to see with our children. So having them bring in like a fidget toy or a book that they can distract themselves on the potty will also help them stay longer on there. So we're more likely to get them to void in the toilet. The patience and consistency part is important. So I think the big thing is to remember that we're still going to run into accidents happening. So that's a big part. Like it's not going to change overnight. So we need to be consistent, be patient. If accidents happen, we're just not overreacting. We're going to say it's okay, we'll try again later, so that it's still a positive experience for the child. How Teresa mentioned, there's phases, right? So we work on daytime and learning to go pee in the potty during the day, then we move into the nighttime, and then eventually into the community and generalizing potty time through all environments. Using a timer and countdown, we always recommend this for kids who have a hard time transitioning away from specific things. So let's say you are putting in potty every hour, we want to use a timer if your child has a hard time moving away from activity. So then the timer or your countdown becomes the bad thing. Like that's the bad guy, not necessarily you. Like we just say, hey, timer went off. Timer said it's time to go potty. So it takes that demand away from you guys. And then don't ask and tell. So this one is important. Sometimes we run into asking the child, do you want to go potty? And that opens up the door to, they can say no. And then we say, no, you have to go. And then we run into behaviors because we had offered the choice and now we're making them go. So we're not making it a choice. We're saying we need to go potty. It's not a choice. It's not a question. There's no yes or no response that they get to do to get out of it. In the next slide, we have, one second. Oh, allowing for choices. So toddlers are very independent. They're very autonomous. They want to do all these things on their own. They want to be in control of their environment. So allowing for choices for things that maybe we normally do for them will help them feel like they're part of the routine. So they have to go potty, yes, but maybe they get to choose what underwear that they get to choose to wear. Do you want Spider-Man or do you want Paw Patrol underwears? And guess what? That reinforces that behavior. Like, okay, I get to choose my own clothing. I'm going to go potty because I want to put these on. Maybe they get to choose which restroom they want to practice in today. Do you want to go upstairs or do you want to do it in downstairs? So those things are important so that they have choices, so they feel in control and are part of the routine themselves. Narrating, modeling, and using simple language is important. So we want to talk about what's happening. So put pants down and sit down, flush toilet, put pants up, wash hands. All of that simple language will help them understand the routine and pick up what those actions mean. And also you guys modeling it or siblings modeling it so that they're able to see that everyone's doing it and it's more reinforcing for them. The apps and Potty Watch. So there is apps on the phone that you can download that is geared towards putting timers on for potty, and you can assign specific songs. I had a family that did this. They downloaded an app and they put timers on for every 45 to 50 minutes, and it was the same song that would play. And then mom would just say it's potty time, and they would kind of sing the jingle all the way to the bathroom. And then at some point, the child just picked it up. Like he heard the song and would walk himself independently to the bathroom without mom having to tell him to go. So that's a really good way to pick up some of those cues that they need to go without you necessarily telling them. And again, it helps you're not the bad guy. Working as a community and team, how we talked about the consistency is important, but also having everybody expect the child to go potty. So if mom's doing it, then dad's doing it. If grandparents live in the home, then grandparents are expecting the child to do the potty training as well. pairing tangible reinforcement with praise. So even though we're reinforcing behaviors with like edibles or specific toys, we still want to add in our social praise. Like, yes, you did it, high five, or good job. Because at some point, like Teresa mentioned, we have to reduce the reinforcer, the tangible or the edible, and just have them go naturally. And we just reinforce that with a hug or a high five so that they don't always expect that tangible item. And then if you're noticing your child's having a hard time, it's okay to take a break. It's not a bad thing. Maybe we thought he was ready and he's not ready. So it's okay to take the break, or maybe we need to take some steps back. Maybe he's still scared of the toilet, so we have to just work on exposure. So all of that is okay. Like Tressa mentioned, no one's gonna ask when your child goes as long as they go. So we can talk to the specialist or even ourselves, and we can come up with some solutions to what the issue is. And then moving into generalization. So after your child learns to go potty in a specific restroom, we want to work on generalization. So we want to expose the child to various toilets, bathrooms in the home so they're able to go in different settings. So downstairs, upstairs, different toilet flushes, even different colored toilets are important to generalize. Some toilets have that cushion seat, some have that hard, cold surface. So letting your child get exposure to all of those things will help them overcome some of those fears, and know like this is still a toilet, even though it might look a little bit different. So I can use the bathroom here. Expanding to different environments, like we mentioned, grandparents' house or family member's house, even going to the public bathroom. Sometimes that's also something we have to overcome, because public bathrooms is not just one toilet. There's various toilets, there's various sounds, and there's other people in there. So now we have to overcome that and make sure that they're able to generalize going to the bathroom, even if there's other people in there. Having other adults in the home or family aid in the process so it's consistent, and also the child knows that they have to do it with everybody. Varying our phrases or instructions. So not just saying it's potty time every time, saying it's time to go to the bathroom, let's go to the restroom, let's go pee. Those are all the same direction, but it's said differently. And it helps the child generalize that direction to the behavior he needs to do. So they need to go potty. And this will help when they go to school. So if the teacher says different phrases, they know that what it means. And then collaborating with daycare and school. So if you're starting to do the potty training, letting your daycare or school know exactly what times you're taking them so that they can do it at school as well, and provide those reinforcers. And then lastly, your varying materials and in the restroom so that they're able to generalize that as well. So like Teresa mentioned, like public restrooms have the hand dryers, and sometimes that's different. So we want them to be able to do that. Use the napkins or towels just so that they know that this is all going to dry their hands. It's just different. So we get them prepared for doing it in any environment. So Teresa's going to close us off with some last few topics.
So when we're thinking about toilet training, when we create a plan with families to do the toilet training process and to get set up, every child's different, every family's different. So the learning times will vary. It is not like a magical number or an average number in which, these child are typically trained in X amount of days or X amount of weeks. It's a process for everybody, and for sometimes things will click versus other things. Or that's another piece why we say collaborate with your daycare or school providers, because they may have tried something and realized that it worked really well. So then that gives you an idea of something new to implement. You want to choose what's best for your child. So although we're professionals and we're experts in the field and we've presented you with all these strategies, what's best for your child is based on what you know about your child. So how are they reinforced? How do they learn? What's the best way for them to walk into this? Do they need to have control? Or can we just make it fun and they're going to jump right in? So keeping that piece in mind, thinking about toilet training, it's going to take some time. It always takes time, especially when we're working on functional communication. So a lot of our learners that we work with, we're targeting language and communication skills. And so even teaching a child to point to the restroom, teaching a child to pull us to the restroom, those things are going to be skills that we might have to work with alongside of the toilet training process to get to that initiation piece. Because the initiation piece, again, will come later. We do have kids who toilet train if mom and dad are taking them regularly and staying on the schedule, but then the initiation piece takes a little bit longer. That's okay. We're just going to be working on that communication piece a little bit more. If we don't succeed on our first try, that's okay. We do often have where we think that this plan is going to work for a child, and like Rebecca said, it is not working, and the child is very upset, and we're almost, we're having these really aversive behaviors. It's okay to step back, to take a break, and assess what went wrong. Let's come back into this at another time. Maybe now's not a good time, especially for families who are going through a lot of changes, like moving or a new baby in the home, or any type of changes in terms of parents going back to work will affect the schedule and the routine. So thinking about that piece, it's okay if we don't succeed at first. We're going to try again. Your kid will eventually get potty trained. It's just a matter of, is now the right time for me and for him? So we do have time now for questions. If anybody has any questions, again, if you have something really specific or you want us to help you come up with a plan for your child, I'm sure even your specialist is knowledgeable enough to say he might do really well with just the modeling. That's also an option too that you can discuss with your teacher. She has access to the data tracking sheets, but if you have any questions, we'll stick around for another 5 minutes, and you can either unmute your mic or you can type in the chat if it's something that you just want to type up. But if not, thank you guys so much for coming. We really appreciate you attending. And we're hoping to host more of these parent training webinars to kind of spread more education to our families.